Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. Before we begin, apologies for the delay in today's session. It was unavoidable due to unforeseen technical issues that we were facing today. But finally, we are live and let's start the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of The Hindu, I have chosen a total of 7 important articles. There are 5 articles which are very interesting and very important both for prelims and mains, and they require a detailed analysis. And we have a couple of small articles that are relevant only for the prelims exam. So let's cover all these topics as comprehensively as possible along with the background information that is beyond what is given in these articles so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. I hope you guys are benefiting from our initiatives, and if you are, please let us know through your comments, through your likes, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. And before we start the discussion, I have a very, very important announcement, and please pay attention to this. We have been receiving a lot of requests from our former students from the former institute where we used to teach. Over there, unfortunately, the classes have been suspended due to the crisis that the former institute has been facing. And we have been flooded with requests from our students asking to help them as their preparation for IAS exams has been interrupted. So we have been receptive to these concerns and we have raised the issue with the Unacademy management as well. And Unacademy has been kind enough to agree to allow those students to shift to Unacademy IAS English at the best possible discounted price so that you guys can continue your preparation without further interruption in your classes. So if you are a student of our former institute, what should you do? All you have to do is share your details in the Google form which is provided in the description box below. Just head to the video description below. At the top, you will see the link for the Google form and you have to share your basic details and our team will get in touch with you and will provide the best possible discounted price so that you can migrate your classes and continue your preparation without any further interruption. So we genuinely hope from the bottom of our heart that this slight initiative from us could help our former students who have been left in between. So with this, let's start with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at the first article from page number 1 of the Delhi edition. On the front page, we have a headline article related to Naxalism in India. Yesterday, there has been a major development in the Dantewada region of Chhattisgarh, where security forces have carried out a major anti-Naxal operation. In this anti-Naxal operation, 9 Maoists have been killed, and as a result, it marks a major victory for India in its fight against Naxalism, which has been a major internal security threat. In fact, this year has been very, very productive for Ministry of Home Affairs and Indian security forces which are battling Naxalism, because in the last few months, 153 Maoists or 153 Naxals have been killed by security forces, and most of them have been in the Bijapur-Dantewada region of Chhattisgarh. I hope you know that this region happens to be the hotbed of left-wing extremism. So in this context, it becomes very important to examine Maoism, the ideology behind this left-wing extremist ideology, and its origin and spread in India and the current status of Naxalism and how India has fought back against Naxalism. So let's have a slightly detailed discussion on this topic. Maoism essentially is a type of left-wing extremist ideology. See, in a civilized democracy, in a modern civilized democracy where you have a constitution, any form of extremist ideology is not tolerable, be it left-wing extremism or right-wing extremism. Right-wing extremism is usually a result of religious fundamentalism or majoritarianism on the lines of ethnicity, race, etc., where one religion, one ethnicity or one race believes that they are superior, leading to targeting of minorities, which essentially leads to the rise of a fascist totalitarian state, like for example Nazi Germany, or terrorist groups like Islamic State, for example. So they fall under the bracket of right-wing extremism. Whereas left-wing extremism is a result of an extremist political ideology that stems from extreme communism. As communism evolved and spread in 1800s and 1900s, in Russia, China, and in many other parts of the world, extreme forms of communism came up. In erstwhile Soviet Union, you might have heard of leaders like Stalin and Lenin, who gave rise to left-wing extremist authoritarian regimes. We saw something similar happen in China during the Chinese Civil War. In 1930s, 1940s, China went through a major civil war that was led by the Communist Party of China. The Communist Party, which had been founded by 1921, was essentially standing up for the rights of peasants, farmers, and workers who felt oppressed in the Chinese society under the then Chinese government, which was the Republic of China. In early 1900s, China was ruled by the Republic of China, and this Chinese regime was accused of being an elitist regime, a regime which was working only for the rich, a regime which was corrupt, which did not care about the plight of farmers, peasants, workers, etc. So this is where the Communist Party of China rose to prominence in 1920s and 30s and triggered a major uprising against the then Chinese government. This communist uprising was led by Mao Zedong, after whom this extremist ideology is named. So Mao Zedong, who would emerge as the General Secretary of the Communist Party of China, would give a call to the farmers, peasants, and the masses to rebel against the Chinese state, to take up armed struggle, to take up weapons against the state, to fight an insurgent war by employing guerrilla warfare tactics in order to overthrow the state and capture state power. So this has always been the prime objective of Maoism. Capturing state power by overthrowing the state through a violent insurgent struggle, through a mass armed struggle, has been the core philosophy of Maoism, which was promoted by Mao Zedong. Now, in the context of China, maybe this rebellion was seen as justifiable. But any resort to such extreme violence in the name of fighting for justice can never be tolerated or excused in a civilized constitutional state. So this left-wing extremist ideology known as Maoism would later spread to other parts of the world, as it succeeded in China because Mao Zedong and the Maoists, they ensured that the Communist Party won the civil war. They successfully overthrew the Republic of China, leading to the establishment of your modern Chinese state, the PRC, People's Republic of China, in 1949. That is how the current Chinese state was born, which happens to be a communist authoritarian regime even today. As you know, in China, there are no fundamental rights, no basic rights which are guaranteed. There is single party rule dominated by the communists, and even today PRC's aggression and its aggressive military diplomatic behavior can be explained by its roots in Maoist ideology, which is a type of left-wing extremist ideology. But as Maoism spread in other parts of the world, it would trigger such uprisings in many countries, including in India. So Maoism, which took root in India in 1967, is referred to as Naxalism. Naxalism is essentially nothing but Maoism, a type of left-wing extremism that took root in India. It's named after the Naxalbari village in West Bengal, which is located near the Siliguri corridor, which is a strategic choke point for India. So this is where Maoism took root in the form of a peasant rebellion, a peasant uprising against the landlords, against the feudal nature of the society in West Bengal. So gradually, throughout 1960s, 70s and 80s, the movement spread across central and eastern parts of India. Especially farmers who were affected by government policies, by lack of development, who were affected by large public projects, because large public projects like dam projects would result in acquisition of farmland, And in many cases, farmers weren't compensated, they weren't consulted. Consensus wasn't built by the state. So there was a deficiency on the part of the state as well, leading to failure of administration and governance. Similarly, tribals in the forested areas of central and eastern India, in the Dandakaranya region, for example, were severely affected by the environmental laws and the displacement caused by various government projects. Government corruption and leakage of funds from welfare schemes also affected the weaker and the poor sections in central and eastern parts of India, especially the farmers, the tribals, the peasants, the landless laborers who were affected by the landlordism and the perpetuation of the feudal nature of the Indian society. And as well as workers in factories during the socialist era. They were affected by the exploitation carried out by the factory owners, who would often get the support of the government, corrupt politicians and corrupt officials. So this overall failure of governance and administration across parts of India inspired the spread of Maoist ideology, which triggered the Naxal rebellion against the Indian state. So these extremists capitalized on these issues affecting farmers, tribals, peasants and workers, and they would radicalize them and brainwash them with their propaganda. By spreading propaganda against the Indian state, they would trigger a mass uprising and lead this armed struggle against the Indian state, which has posed the most significant internal security threat for India. In fact, by 1970s, 1980s, Naxalism spread far and wide across multiple states. Multiple Maoist branches came up. For example, the Maoist Communist Center of India, MCCI, started operating in the West Bengal, Bihar belt, which includes today's Jharkhand as well. So it became a notorious insurgent outfit targeting Indian security forces, government officials, government buildings, and even Indian elections. Parallelly, another branch of Maoism took root in Andhra Pradesh Odisha belt, led by the PWG, the People's War Group, which was mainly centered around the then state of Andhra Pradesh and Odisha, covering parts of Chhattisgarh, parts of Madhya Pradesh and parts of Maharashtra, including the Vidarbha Amravati belt. So wherever farmer issues were present, tribal issues were present, wherever peasants and workers were affected, in those areas, Naxal ideology was very quickly spread by the Maoists through their propaganda to trigger and promote this armed rebellion against the Indian state. So in a constitutional democracy like India, there is no space for such extremism, because even if you are affected by poor administration and malgovernance, you always have other avenues to address your concerns. You can fight elections, you can use the media to expose the corrupt activities of the officials and the politicians. You can go to the courts, seek justice through the judiciary, which is an independent judiciary. So when so many avenues are available in a modern civilized democracy like India, taking up arms against the Indian state, resorting to mindless violence against civilians, innocent civilians and security forces is simply inexcusable. So Naxalism remains an extremist ideology, a fundamentalist ideology, which has posed a significant threat to our internal security. So state governments, with the support of the center, started targeting Naxalism in the 80s and 90s, and they mainly approached this as a security problem. This is where the Indian state made a mistake in fighting Naxalism. They never acknowledged the root cause, which was the poor governance, the maladministration, the corruption within the government, which had in a way given rise and enabled Naxalism. So when you don't address the genuine root causes and concerns which are present, you can never defeat such strong ideological movements. Even though security operations were stepped up by the state police, because state police is primarily responsible to tackle with internal threats like Naxalism, as police and law and order is a state subject. The center supplemented their resources with the central forces, but approaching this purely as a security problem did not really solve the problem for India. Even though Naxalism weakened by early 2000, both MCCI and as well as PWG, they were weakened because of our security operations targeting the Naxals. The top leadership was taken out. Their sources of funding and their sources of raising weapons were targeted. Their strongholds were targeted. And as a result, Naxalism did see a major decline by early 2000. But the ideology was not defeated. In the year 2004, a major development took place with regard to Naxalism. These weakened Maoist outfits, they merged and they united. MCCI merged with PWG and other Maoist forces in the country to establish one of the most notorious insurgent terrorist outfits, the CPI Maoist. Communist Party of India Maoist was established in 2004 by merging the various Maoist factions, which made this a formidable insurgent group. Ministry of Home Affairs, which is responsible for internal security, designated CPI Maoist as a terrorist organization under the provisions of Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Given that CPI Maoist was resorting to blind acts of violence, targeting civilians and our security forces. So since then, India has been fighting back, and over the last 15 years, we have seen some success. Because if you look at the data from Home Ministry, if you go back to 1970s, 1980s, at one point, nearly 33% of India's land area was under Naxal influence. Almost 180 plus districts had a Naxal influence, ranging from West Bengal, Bihar, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, parts of Western Ghats in Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, parts of Delhi and Punjab as well, where industrial clusters were present. So across these multiple states, Naxal presence, Naxal activity had increased, posing a major threat for our internal security. At least in 60 to 80 districts, Naxals had established a stronghold, and they had even liberated at least a few areas, and they would call them the so-called liberated zones by throwing out the Indian administration from these areas in Chhattisgarh, Odisha, West Bengal, etc. But from here, India has seen a major success because we have managed to bring down the presence and the reach and influence of Naxalism. Then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh labelled Naxalism as India's biggest internal security threat. He said left-wing extremism is India's biggest internal security threat. Finally, there was an acknowledgement that Naxalism is not just a security problem, but it is also an administrative problem. There is an acknowledgement from the Vajpayee era and the Manmohan Singh era that the root causes which triggered Naxalism were never addressed. So over the last 15 to 20 years, there has been a two-pronged approach or a two-pillar approach to tackle Naxalism. One, of course, is to tackle the Naxals by using our security forces and intelligence agencies and by improving our counter-insurgency operations. And the other approach has been to solve the administrative governance-related issues by providing better connectivity, better welfare schemes, by focusing on the Naxal-affected districts, and by targeting welfare programs to help the farmers, the tribals, and the peasants and the workers. So this two-pronged approach of India has worked, and it has given tremendous results. Under the Manmohan Singh government, a major counter-insurgency operation was launched called Operation Green Hunt, through which several Naxals were eliminated in the stronghold areas. See, after CPI Maoist was formed, it shifted its base primarily to the Chhattisgarh-Odisha belt. Previously, we studied that MCCI was mainly centered around West Bengal, Bihar belt, whereas PWG was centered around Andhra Pradesh, Odisha belt. But after these groups were weakened and they came together and united to form CPI Maoist, they shifted the hotbed area to Chhattisgarh, Odisha belt in the dense forested areas over here. So districts like Dantewada, Bijapur, Bastar, which are in the news, they became the hotspots of Naxalism in the last 15 to 20 years. And India has adopted the two-pronged approach, and the center has been working closely with the states in assisting them to fight Naxalism. Central forces like the CRPF has been designated as the primary anti-Naxal force, which raised a dedicated jungle warfare unit called Cobra Battalion. A special force unit called Cobra was raised by CRPF to specialize in guerrilla and jungle warfare to target the Naxals. Other central armed police forces under a home ministry like BSF were also deployed in the states to assist the state police, and the home ministry even supported the modernization of police forces. The center funded the modernization of state police forces and their anti-Naxal units to improve intelligence gathering, to provide better training and to procure better weapons and equipment in order to tackle the threat of Naxalism. Even intelligence agencies like IB and NTRO played a major role in providing actionable intelligence, and various technological assets from satellites to drones to even helicopters of Indian Air Force have been used as force multipliers to step up our counterinsurgency operations against Naxals. So these security operations have been yielding results, and the Modi government has stepped up this approach by adopting the Samadhan doctrine. Samadhan is a security doctrine which has been adopted by the Modi government. It's an acronym. Each letter stands for a certain goal, a certain target which has been assigned by the Modi government. And under the national policy for tackling left-wing extremism, India has done quite well by working with the states, by not just addressing the root causes and the governance-related problems, but also by stepping up the security operations. So according to Home Ministry's data, today Naxalism is on a downward trend. Today, hardly around 15 to 20 districts remain as the stronghold areas of Naxals. From around 180 districts which were under Naxal influence, today hardly around 30 to 35 districts are under Naxal influence, with Naxals having a stronghold maybe in around 15 to 20 districts, not more than that. So this marks a significant decline in Naxalism, and it also highlights the success of our two-pronged strategy, where we have stepped up our intelligence-driven security operations, while parallelly we have focused on better governance, better administration, and targeted welfare programs, so that we can address the root causes which can defeat this fundamentalist ideology. So this is what we learn from this important update, because this year 153 Naxals have been killed by security forces. This marks a big win for India with regard to weakening Naxalism. So please take up a practice question. Under GS paper 3, you can expect such a practice question. Naxalism has been on the decline in recent years. That is the statement which has been given. So evaluate the strategy that has worked for India. So how do you approach answer writing for such questions? It's a fairly simple, straightforward question. All you have to do is, you have to do justice to both the statements which are there in this question. So when you start out your answer in the introduction, you can talk about the earlier spread of Naxalism, what was the extent of Naxal influence and Naxal presence, and how it has seen a decline in recent years. So that way you are setting the right context. See, for this question, you need not explain what is Maoist ideology and its history. You need not go into the origin of Naxalism, how it started in India, how it spread in India. That is not necessary here. The question is not talking about that. It's talking about the recent decline seen in Naxalism and what strategy has worked for India. So keep your answer specific, keep it concise and focused to the given question. In the introduction, you can set the right context by comparing the data. Point out the number of districts that were under Naxal influence, the kind of presence Naxals had back in 70s and 80s, how it saw an upsurge in early 2000. But now, in the last 10-15 years, we have brought about a major decline. So presenting the data will set the right tone and the right context, and then in the body you can discuss the strategy. You can discuss the two-pronged strategy adopted by India, discuss the security measures under one paragraph in bullet points, and discuss the administrative measures. You also need to point out that left-wing extremism, which is rooted in certain genuine root causes, cannot be defeated just through a security approach. Just by using force, you can't wipe out such a strong ideological movement. So along with security approach, you need an administrative approach to address the genuine root causes that exist, which has affected our farmers, our tribals. So that problem has to be acknowledged, and specific schemes and initiatives have to be designed to address the root problems. So that is exactly what India has done. So please give those examples of various initiatives and welfare programs, along with the improvements that we have done in our counterinsurgency operations. And finally, conclude your answer. you can say that, maybe you can suggest that even though Naxalism is on the decline, we should not be complacent. There should be no complacency, because such strong ideological movements can revive. We have seen in other countries where insurgencies have revived after a period of decline. For example, look at Taliban. Taliban had been weakened by the American forces, but eventually Taliban made a revival. In India, Naxals, they had been weakened by 90s and early 2000, and they made a revival in 2004 by uniting to form CPI Maoist. So we cannot be complacent just because Naxalism has declined. We need to step up our security and administrative efforts to wipe out this movement entirely, which represents a major threat to India's integrity and sovereignty. So you can provide a suggestion like that, or maybe think of a good way forward and add that as your conclusion, and this will make a very good answer. So let me know what you think. Please try to write an answer as well based on this and post the answers in the comment section. I'll take a look at your comments later. Now let's look at another important and interesting article on page number 8. This column is related to AI governance. As you all know, artificial intelligence is one of the critical emerging technologies of today's world. AI and critical emerging technologies, they are already driving the fourth stage of the industrial revolution. If steam power drove the first industrial revolution, if electricity drove the second stage of the industrial revolution, and if computers communication drove the third stage of the industrial revolution, then AI and critical emerging technologies like robotics, 5G, 6G networks, and machine learning, big data, they are driving the fourth stage of the industrial revolution. So obviously AI is having a huge impact, not just on our economy, but also on our society and also on the geopolitics of the world. Because those who control such critical technologies will determine the future of global geopolitics. So a geopolitical game has broken out over the governance of AI, and a global initiative has been started to bring out a global platform to govern and regulate AI and critical emerging technologies. It's in this context that the writer is examining what role can India play when it comes to AI governance. Because AI presents many advantages. It can help in eliminating manual routine tasks, bringing more efficiency into the industry and creating new opportunities and opening up new sectors. It can completely transform our traditional economy, from power production to computing to even healthcare, education. Every single sector, including governance, can be completely revolutionized, and this revolution is already underway. It's not something which is going to happen in the future. It has already started happening. I'm sure all of you are familiar with generative AI tools like ChatGPT and the revolutionary impact they have had on the economy and the society. So along with such advantages, they bring a lot of concerns and risks as well. AI tools can be easily misused to spread fake news and misinformation, to enable cyber attacks, or there might be a future where jobs could be under threat, where AI programs and AI tools and machines can take over traditional jobs, leading to rise in unemployment. There are many risks arising out of the adoption of AI to human rights, to democracy, and as well as to your basic fundamental rights. This raises ethical concerns as well regarding the adoption of AI. So that is why it is very crucial to bring out a global governance framework to govern AI and other critical emerging technologies. So in this regard, the United Nations has already taken a step. So this month, the UN is hosting a critical summit, which we will be covering in detail in the coming days. The UN Future Summit. Prime Minister Modi will also be participating in the summit. India will be a major participant along with all the UN member states. It's one of the most hyped and the most awaited UN summits, the UN Future Summit. It mainly focuses on critical emerging technologies, the technologies of the future, and how it can impact our world, be it sustainability, equity, or even climate change, global warming. All these areas could be disrupted and affected by critical emerging technologies like AI. So to determine a global framework for critical emerging technologies and the future of the global economy and technology, the UN Future Summit is being held this month. And during the UN Future Summit, there will be a discussion on the Global Digital Compact, also abbreviated as GDC. The United Nations is pushing for a global framework to govern and regulate AI and critical emerging technologies. A framework to regulate and govern these critical emerging technologies. So a global digital compact has been proposed, and it will be something like your climate change convention, for example. When climate change, global warming became a global threat by 1980s. In 1990s, in early 1992, the United Nations brought out the Climate Change Convention, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So this led to the adoption of few agreements like Kyoto Protocol, Paris Agreement, which provides for tackling climate change and global warming. So on similar lines, a global compact is being negotiated for digital technologies and critical emerging technologies of the future in order to govern and regulate these critical technologies, so that the ethical human right concerns with regard to democracy and human rights can be addressed, so that we can ensure that AI and other critical technologies don't pose a threat to our civilized democracies and human rights and fundamental rights. We can ensure that AI and critical technologies are used only for the benefit of mankind, and ensure that it benefits every country, every community equitably. There should be inclusiveness, there should be sustainability which is built into these technologies. So that is the purpose of the Global Digital Compact, which is going to be negotiated. But however, the two major global powers, they've already taken a lead in this regard, and they are pushing their respective agendas. The United States has already pushed for the adoption of a resolution at UN General Assembly, which mainly seeks to protect and promote American interests and America's leadership role in AI technologies and critical emerging technologies. And to counter the United States, its rival, China, also has pushed a resolution at UN which has already been adopted that pushes and protects the Chinese interests. So the geopolitical competition between US and China, which has become a bipolar contest, is very clearly evident in the field of AI and critical emerging technologies of the future. So if US and China continue to dominate this domain, if they were to determine the framework, the regulations, the governance, it will only serve their self-interests, and it could compromise the interests of developing nations, including India and the global south. If you look at the resolution which has been adopted at the behest of United States, it gives the US a pivotal role to lead the future technologies which are coming up. Same with China. China is pushing for a resolution which has been adopted that mainly seeks to promote and protect Chinese leadership in AI technologies and critical emerging technologies. So this bipolar geopolitical context which has broken out over these technologies, it could divide the world, and it could leave the developing and underdeveloped countries behind, turning this into another geopolitical contest. So this is where the writer feels that India can play a very proactive and a positive role and contribute to the governance of critical emerging technologies. See, India already has done this at United Nations. The UN would be the perfect platform for this, because UN has universal membership, at least UN General Assembly. It has universal membership of all 193 member states. So all countries will be part of these negotiations. And India already has a lot of experience in bringing the developing countries and like-minded countries together. In the past, we have repeatedly brought the like-minded developing and underdeveloped countries together to create equity at the global level, to bring inclusiveness into such global negotiations and discussions. For example, if you look at the climate change negotiations under UNFCCC, be it the Kyoto Protocol or Paris Agreement, India has always played a critical role in uniting the global south, in bringing the developing, underdeveloped, like-minded countries together and presenting a voice, raising their concerns by acting as their voice at the global level. For example, when climate change negotiations began in 1990s, it was India which formed the Green Council so that developed countries could be pushed to take up greater responsibility. This led to the introduction and adoption of CBDR principle, common but differentiated responsibilities. It was India and other developing countries that insisted that fighting climate change is a common goal, but responsibilities have to be differentiated. Countries have to take up a different responsibility depending on the extent of emissions that they have contributed, which is called historical emissions. So this put the onus on developed countries, industrialized economies, which were primarily responsible for burning fossil fuels. This brought the principle of equity into climate change negotiations by the adoption of CBDR principle, which was an Indian initiative with other developing and like-minded countries. We formed groups like the BASIC with Brazil, South Africa and China to give a push for equity and inclusiveness at climate change negotiations. We have done this repeatedly, even during the recent G20 summit and the Global Partnership for AI, the GPAI. Even during the Global Partnership for AI conference and the G20, India has always promoted inclusiveness and equity and the concerns and interests of the global south. Because developing, underdeveloped countries and poor countries, they don't even have access to these technologies. They don't have access to computing facilities, they don't have the infrastructure, the processors, they don't have even basic internet and electricity to even think of investing in AI technologies and critical emerging technologies. So developed industrialized countries already have a lead, they already have an advantage. So this could leave behind a large part of the world behind, and this could increase inequality. It could defeat the goals of sustainable development, which is a priority for United Nations. So India is in a perfect position to influence these negotiations at the Global Digital Compact during the UN Future Summit. We can present a voice, raise the concerns of the poor and the developing, underdeveloped countries, and bring them together to form a collective group which can put pressure on US, China and other global powers to ensure that principle of equity, inclusiveness and sustainability is introduced into the future governance of AI and critical technologies. So this is the core point being made by the writer, and based on this, let's look at a practice question. AI governance should factor in the concerns of the global south. Examine the role India can play in this regard. So again, it's a pretty straightforward question, so I'll not be discussing the model answer, and I expect you to pick up this question, use the points that we have discussed and structure that into a good answer. We've already discussed one question, so using that approach, try to build a good answer for this question and try to post the answer in the comment section. Now let's look at the third article for today, again from page number 8, related to social justice and economy. This article, written by Sam Pitroda, deals with the rising income inequality in India and around the world. That is the focus of the article. Recently, there have been several reports regarding rising income inequality between the rich and the poor, not just in India but around the world. We have seen reports regarding how the top 1% in India control majority of the resources and assets and the national income, leaving behind very little for the rest of the 99% of our population. The World Inequality Lab, in its latest report, pointed out that majority of our national income in the country is controlled by the top 1%. It belongs to the top 1%. So, to ensure a fair, equitable, inclusive society, it is important to bridge the divide, the income inequality, the social divide that exists in our country, in our society. The writer says that this is not just a debate about rich versus poor. It's not just about snatching the money from the rich like a Robin Hood and distributing it to the poor. He says that is not the focus of the discussion. He says that this is about equity, inclusiveness, which is the core essence of any liberal constitutional democracy. If you look at the Indian Constitution, under the directive principles of state policy, there is a mandate to the state to prevent concentration of wealth, to distribute the resources equitably. Now, can you find out which article is this under the directive principles and mention that in the comment section below? So, democratic states have an obligation, they have a duty to ensure there is equality in the society. There is a lesser divide between the rich and the poor. So, it's not just about imposing heavy taxes on the rich and snatching money from them and giving it to the poor. It's not as simple as that. It's about distributing the concentration of wealth, preventing the concentration of wealth and distributing the resources to provide for overall welfare, to ensure there is equity and inclusiveness with regard to the growth story of a country. So the writer is talking about tools like progressive taxation. How progressive taxation, especially focused on high net worth individuals and corporates, can generate sufficient fiscal capability for the government. It can create the required fiscal space by bringing revenue which can be used for socio-economic welfare programs like improving education, providing better health care, focusing on rural development, urban infrastructure, providing for skill development and job creation. That is exactly what will empower our citizens, our youth, and ensure that the bottom section of the society is uplifted. See, India already has done incredibly well in the last 3 to 4 decades in lifting millions of people out of poverty because of the tremendous growth that the country has seen. But despite the poverty reduction, the divide between rich and poor has been widening and increasing. This is also a criticism of globalization as well. Increased globalization and capitalism has increased the divide between the rich and the poor, even though we have lifted millions of people out of poverty. So bridging that gap, the divide, is also essential to ensure a stable society and a fair, equitable society. So progressive taxation could be a way out, according to the writer. A fair taxation targeting high net worth individuals, corporates, bringing more fiscal revenue to the government, creating more space for the government so that it can spend on critical welfare programs, well targeted, well designed and well implemented welfare schemes in education, healthcare, etc., to uplift the people and to reduce that divide. In fact, there are many examples around the world. Many countries adopt trees. The wealthy and the rich can't simply inherit the wealth. They can't simply pass down all the wealth to their family, to their children. In the range of 40 to 50%, taxes are collected to ensure that a large part of the wealth of the ultra rich is secured by the government, which can be used for welfare and development programs. Only around 50 to 60% of the wealth of the ultra rich can be passed down to the subsequent generations. So this is not a bad proposal at all. If implemented correctly, right? If implemented with the right intention, such progressive taxation, inheritance taxes can bring the revenue for the government, which can create the fiscal space to implement better socio-economic welfare programs. So such tools and such ideas need to be considered. There needs to be more data on the divide between the rich and the poor. Right now, all the data we have is from think tanks and NGOs and global organizations. We need more official data, maybe from Niti Aayog, which clearly paints the picture regarding the divide between the rich and the poor. So there has to be proactive initiatives from the government to distribute those resources, prevent the concentration of wealth, and ensure that social justice is done. That is when equity will be promoted, inclusiveness will be promoted in a constitutional democracy. So that is the core essence of this column. Now let's look at another important article on page number 10 related to economy. Recently, Google, the tech giant, lost a major case in the United States. It lost a court battle. In this particular case, Google has been held guilty of creating an illegal monopoly in the search engine market. So let's quickly examine the context of this particular case, the allegations against Google, how does it affect the tech ecosystem, how does it affect you and me as common people, how does it impact the economy. Let's take a look at this. See, there are these tech giants referred to as the big tech, companies like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, of course Google and its parent company Alphabet, Meta, which owns multiple social media platforms, X, Netflix, many others. They all fall under the bracket of big tech. And these American giant companies, they have a dominating control over the global market. As you know, Google has a very wide presence. It has multiple products and offerings, from its cloud services to office tools to its operating system to its search engine. It has multiple offerings and products that allows these companies to maintain a dominant position in the market. Now, this particular case, which was in the news in United States, is related to the Google search engine, which I'm sure is a default search engine for most of us. Irrespective of the mobile phones that we all are using, irrespective of the laptops and computers that we all are using, I'm sure at least 90% of us will be relying on Google search engine to search and browse the internet. Tell me if I am wrong. Tell me what is your preferred browser in the comments. That will let us know the dominant presence of Google in the search engine market. Now, the problem here is that, see, Google definitely has a great product. Google search engine is very easy to use. It has a great user interface. It provides you very quick, accurate results, and it essentially gives you a superior product experience. So, in an open free market, a company which has been able to build such a solid product should be able to reap the benefits as well. There's nothing wrong with that. But problem is, when a company which has a superior presence, a dominant presence in the market, if it starts misusing that dominant position. See, according to data, Google search engine captures 90% of the market share. Data clearly shows that out of all the search engines, from Microsoft Edge to Apple Safari, Mozilla Firefox, and all the others, Google search engine has 90% of the market share globally. This is clearly a dominant position, almost a monopolistic position. But if it is purely due to the superiority of the product, then there is no problem, there is nothing wrong with that. There is a concern which was brought up in this particular case. The case was pushed by the US Department of Justice, by the US government itself. The allegation against Google is that Google has entered into these deals with the device manufacturers or original equipment manufacturers. So, companies like Apple, Samsung, and others, which are the major producers of your mobile phones, your laptops, your computers, they are getting paid in billions of dollars from Google to provide Google search engine as the default search engine. Even in Apple iPhone or in the Mac systems, even though Apple has its own search browser and search tool, it provides Google search as a default option. Why? Because Apple is getting paid almost $20 billion every year by Google. Google is basically buying the real estate, the tech real estate on these devices and platforms. Samsung and many other device manufacturers, they have an agreement with Google where Google pays them billions of dollars through the ad revenue it is generating through your data. And it's paying these companies to list Google search engine as the default search engine, which automatically pushes most of the users towards Google search engine. Correct? Now, many of us, we may not put the effort to install another search engine or to move to another search engine. Whatever default option is there, we continue using that, we get used to it, accustomed to it, and this allows a tech giant like Google to maintain its dominant presence in the market. So, this is where the criticism comes in, that Google is buying the tech real estate by paying these companies and device manufacturers to list its search engine as a default search engine. This is seen as anti-competitive. This essentially allows Google to maintain its dominant position, maintain the monopoly, which can stifle competition. So, small players, small companies who are trying to compete, they can never match Google's market share. So, Google can abuse its position as well tomorrow to levy higher charges on the customers. The consumers might end up paying a bigger price through subscriptions and their data, and Google could further capitalize and monetize this as well, further strengthening its dominant position in the market. So that is the allegation and the concern, and the court has ruled that Google indeed has resorted to an illegal monopoly. This has been the court ruling, that Google has created an illegal monopoly by paying the device manufacturers to list its own search engine as a default search engine. But however, there is a counter argument as well. Of course, Google will be appealing this particular judgment, right? The case will continue in the United States and will continue to track that. But please understand, there is a counter argument which is a very valid argument. Now, just for a second, imagine a retail chain. Imagine a major fast food chain or a clothing brand. They mainly rely on offline outlets. They rely on brick and mortar shops to basically reach their customers and sell their products. Now, what if a company pays for higher real estate, for a better location, for better visibility? Take your popular clothing brands, for example, or popular footwear brands, watch brands. Don't they compete and pay for the best possible real estate? They take shops on lease in popular shopping malls, in the central business district, in high visibility locations at airports. Every company will try to spend the money it has in getting that visibility, getting that good real estate, that good location, so that they can reach the customer and have a presence where they can connect with the customer and sell their products. So this is purely market forces at work. It's a free market. If you have the money, you can afford to buy a better shop, lease a better outlet, maybe in a mall at the airport or at a better location, so that you have better visibility. Now that is exactly what Google is doing on the internet. By tying up with device manufacturers, it's paying for the digital real estate, which is to get listed as a default option. So those who support Google, they argue that Google has not done anything wrong. Google search engine is preferred according to them because of its superiority. They say that Google search engine is a superior product. There is no competitor. Other companies have not been able to match the versatility and the user friendliness of Google search engine and the accuracy of Google search engine. So what's wrong if people prefer to use Google search engine and if it is given as a default option? Because then Google is simply buying real estate by tying up with Apple, Microsoft and Samsung and others. It's paying for it and it's getting a prominent visibility and a presence on the devices, and people continue to use that. If it wasn't a good product, let's say Google search engine had problems, even if it's a default option, we wouldn't use that. We would move away to another search engine, right? So this is a very valid counter argument. And also, those who support Google, they point out that Google's monopoly is not forever. Nothing will remain permanent in the field of technology. If you go back, let's say 2 decades ago, before Google search engine came up, the popular search engine was Microsoft Internet Explorer. Many of you might remember those days where the only available popular browser was Internet Explorer. But today, where is Microsoft search engine and its browser? It's gone. It's completely gone out of market favor. Google competed with Microsoft, which had a dominant position at one point, be it with regard to the search engine market or be it with regard to the browser. Microsoft, companies like Yahoo, they had a dominant presence at one point 20 years ago. But now these products have been cast away by Google, which emerged as a superior product with better offerings and better features. So tomorrow there might be another company, another startup, because there is no restriction on any other company from innovating. Be it in United States or in any other free market, there are no restrictions, legal hurdles that prevents another tech company or startup to compete with Google search engine. So 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, there might be a better rival, a better superior product which can outcompete Google search engine, which means free market forces are at play. And it's incorrect to penalize Google for the current dominant position that it has. Just because it controls 90% of the market share doesn't mean it's an abusive position, because competition can still thrive. Companies can still compete and come out with better products to replace Google search engine. So let's see how this case will proceed. Google definitely has appealed against it, and we need to wait and watch as to how things will come up in the future. Also, we should look out for the court ruling. The court is going to pass a final ruling. Maybe it might ask Google to split up its products into different companies and holdings in order to reduce Google's dominance, which is an extreme unlikely position. Or it might ask Google and the device manufacturers to end the deal that they have, where Google search engine is given as a default option. Or it might order the device manufacturers to give other options as well. Along with Google search engine, you should have the option to choose your search engine, your browser. So maybe such a ruling might come out, but Google will definitely appeal against this, and this legal battle is likely to continue. And this has implications for India as well, for the entire world. So let's keep tracking this story. Now coming to another update from international relations, on page 16 we have an article. Russian President Putin has visited Mongolia. Now why is this significant? It is very significant because this is the first visit of Russian President Putin after an arrest warrant was issued against him by the International Criminal Court. We have discussed in our previous classes that ICC, International Criminal Court, which is headquartered at The Hague in Netherlands, which was established under the Rome Statute to deal with international crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity. It issued an arrest warrant against Putin for the war crimes that Russia has committed in Ukraine during the Russia-Ukraine war. Now please find out when the Rome Statute was signed, when it came into force, and when ICC was established. I want the years. That is the exercise, the homework for you. Find out when Rome Statute was signed, when it came into force, when ICC was set up. So ICC has issued an arrest warrant. So if Putin were to visit a member country which has signed and ratified the Rome Statute, which is a member of International Criminal Court, this member country will have an obligation to arrest Putin. For example, South Africa is a member of ICC. It has signed and ratified the Rome Statute. So Putin was supposed to visit South Africa, but at the last minute he cancelled the visit because South Africa would be under an obligation to arrest Putin because of his arrest warrant. Now Mongolia is also a member. As you know, it's a major country in the East Asia, Central Asia region, bordering China and Russia. It's a very vast country blessed with resources, and Russia is looking to step up its ties with Mongolia. So during this important visit, Russia and Mongolia have signed an agreement on a power plant project. They have signed an agreement on aviation fuel supply and also connectivity, train connectivity especially between Russia and Mongolia. So energy relations and connectivity relations were the focus of this visit of Putin to Mongolia. He was well received with the Mongolian government and he has not been arrested at all, even though Mongolia is a member of International Criminal Court. There was pressure on Mongolia, especially Ukraine was asking Mongolia to arrest Putin once he lands, as he is a wanted criminal who has an arrest warrant against him under the provisions of Rome Statute issued by the International Criminal Court. But Mongolia has refused to abide by these restrictions and it has treated Putin as a state guest, went ahead and signed agreements as well in the power and energy sector and connectivity sector, thus cementing Russia-Mongolia relations. So that is the update that we get from this important article. Now coming to the last part of today's discussion, the prelims section, we have an article on page number 1 referring to a report by the World Bank. World Bank has brought out India Development Update. Please write down the name of the report. UPSC tends to ask questions on reports of World Banks and such international organizations. India Development Update is a report brought out by the World Bank that looks at India's economy, our economic prospects and our trade opportunities. According to this World Bank report, India's growth for this fiscal has been revised to 7%. Earlier, World Bank had projected India's growth at 6.6% for financial year 24-25. Now it has been revised upwards to 7%, pointing towards the bullishness on the Indian economy. World Bank is very clear that India will remain the fastest growing major economy in the world, and this is great news for India. Similar assessments have been provided by IMF and Asian Development Bank as well. In recent projections by IMF and ADB, India's growth for this fiscal has been pegged at 7%. This is possible because our manufacturing has remained quite strong, registering a 9.9% growth. The services industry has been resilient, showing sustained growth. Only agriculture has underperformed over the last fiscal, but manufacturing and services has held up the Indian economy, and thus India shines as a bright spot in a global economy which is looking very gloomy because of the disruption caused by the pandemic, because of the Russia-Ukraine war, the Gaza war, the looming prediction of a global recession, the slowdown in US and in China and in Japan. All these global factors have added headwinds to the global economy. When every other economy is underperforming, India remains the sole bright spot and the only major economy which is growing at this rate. So even employment numbers are slightly improving. Even though urban youth unemployment is still at 17%, which is quite high, female unemployment numbers have improved in urban areas. It has dropped to 8.5%, which means more jobs are getting created, and especially women are finding more jobs in the urban areas, thus bridging the gender gap. So there are many positives for India coming out of this World Bank report, and that's why I feel this report can be very important. Next, the last article for today. The Centre has approved a major capital acquisition plan for the armed forces amounting to 1.44 lakh crore rupees. The Ministry of Defence, which is responsible for defence procurement for the armed forces, consists of the Defence Acquisition Council, which is headed by the Defence Minister of India. This is the apex body, the apex decision-making body when it comes to defence procurement. When it comes to procuring arms and weapons for the Army, Navy, Air Force and Coast Guard, the apex decision-making body is the Defence Acquisition Council within the Defence Ministry, chaired by the Defence Minister of India. So the Defence Acquisition Council has approved several projects, and they can be important for our exams. One major project which has been approved is Project 17B for the Indian Navy. Under Project 17B, 7 stealth frigates will be built indigenously by GRSE and Mazgaon Dock Limited. These are India's domestic shipbuilding public sector companies. They will be building 7 stealth frigates for the Indian Navy under Project 17B, which will enhance the operational reach and capabilities of the Indian Navy. Next, the Defence Acquisition Council has also approved the development and procurement of future-ready combat vehicles, which can replace the battle tanks that we have, such as the T-72 and the T-90, which are of Russian origin. T-72, T-90 are the main battle tanks that we have with the army, and they are aging, they are getting outdated, and we also have problems with Russian technology. So India is looking to replace them in the coming years with a future-ready combat vehicle. Plus, air defense radars have been approved for the Indian Air Force to improve air defense capability, mainly to protect India's airspace. And also the procurement of Dornier reconnaissance patrol aircraft has been approved, along with offshore patrol vessels for the Coast Guard of India. Offshore patrol vessels can help in stepping up maritime patrolling and surveillance, which is conducted by the Coast Guard, and allow the Coast Guard to conduct long-range operations. India has a very vast exclusive economic zone, and we face multiple threats from organized crime to piracy to smuggling. So tackling these threats is the main responsibility of the Coast Guard. So offshore patrol vessels are being procured along with Dornier reconnaissance aircraft to step up our aerial and maritime surveillance. So these are the key defense acquisition projects which have been approved, and 99% of the acquisition will be done indigenously. The model which will be used will be the Buy Indian model. Essentially, these equipment will be bought from Indian companies, and by using Buy Indian Indigenously Designed, Developed and Manufactured category, or IIDDM category. So there are different categories under which procurement is done through the Defence Acquisition Council. The focus is on indigenization. The focus is to move away from foreign dependency, to buy from Indian companies, and especially those companies which design, develop and manufacture indigenously. So this is the important update from this article, and on this note, I would like to bring my discussion to an end. I hope you guys have liked today's session. So if you want, you can join my Telegram channel as well by scanning the QR code and this will help you in being connected with the educators as well. So as I mentioned, if there are any former students from our former institute who are suffering from the shutdown of classes there, we are trying to provide an opportunity. Unacademy management has agreed to provide the best possible price for those students so that they can enroll with us and continue their preparation without interruption. So to avail that, there is a Google form which has been provided in the description. Please click on it, share your details. Our team will get in touch with you to provide the best possible assistance so that you can enroll for the online classroom program and continue your IAS preparation. So on this note, I would like to bring the session to an end. If you have liked the session, understood everything, please let me know through your likes, through your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it for today. I'll see you in the next class. Take care. Have a good day.